the weight of 1,000 eyes felt like a physical pressure against her skin. Chloe moved through the grand ballroom of the Sheila Hotel as if she belonged there, a skill she had perfected long before her life had fractured. The dress was the reason, a column of crimson silk that clung to every curve, whispering promises and threats with every step she took. It was a declaration. Not for him, she told herself. For her. The color of a life she was reclaiming, one meticulously curated auction and high-stakes client at a time. She was an art appraiser, one of the best under 30 on the international circuit. Her specialty was authenticating Joseon dynasty porcelain, a niche that brought her into the orbit of men with unimaginable wealth and questionable ethics. Men like their host tonight, Park Min-ho. His collection was rumored to be as vast as his criminal enterprise, and he was courting her to broker the sale of a legendary moon jar. This gala, a glittering facade for his less savory dealings, was the final stage of her professional seduction. A waiter offered a flute of champagne. She took it, the cool glass a steadying presence in her hand. Her gaze swept the room, cataloging the power players, the political puppets, the beautiful women who were both assets and liabilities. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and ambition. She was so focused on her target, on maintaining the serene, untouchable mask of Chloe Williams, appraiser extraordinaire, that she didn't feel the shift in the room's atmosphere until it was too late. The ambient chatter didn't just quiet. It was sliced clean through. A sudden, sharp vacuum of sound that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. That is when she made the mistake of looking up. Across the expanse of marble and silk, he stood near the entrance.
Kvontayon.
He wasn't supposed to be here. This was Park's territory, a den of his sworn enemy. To appear here was not a power play. It was a declaration of war. But he didn't look like a man preparing for battle. He looked like a man who had just been shot. He was frozen, his entire being focused on her. The suit was brioni, a shade of charcoal so dark it was almost black, tailored with surgical precision. But she wasn't looking at the suit. She was looking at his hands. The hands that had once been so gentle with her, tracing the line of her spine, were now clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. His eyes, usually a cold, calculating obsidian, were black holes of raw, undiluted fury. And it was all for her, for the dress. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own making. She had worn it to feel powerful, to erase the memory of being his. Instead, it had become a beacon, summoning the one man and soul she had spent the last 6 months trying to escape. Then, a smooth voice slid into the silence beside her. An unexpected guest, it seems, Park Min-ho materialized at her elbow, his smile as polished and predatory as the diamond pinky ring he wore. It seems my celebration has attracted royalty from the wrong side of the river. His hand settled on the small of her back, a gesture of proprietary ownership that was meant for an audience of one.
Tayon.
Park leaned in, his breath a foul mix of expensive whiskey and corruption. You, my dear, are causing quite the international incident. Chloe wanted to pull away, to shrug off the possessive weight of his hand, but she was pinned by Taejun's gaze. He started moving. He didn't rush. He moved like the room owed him space, like the air itself parted for him. The crowd melted away from his path, a silent, fearful testament to his reputation. He wasn't armed. She knew he wouldn't be, not here. His power wasn't in the weapons his men carried. It was in the absolute, unnerving stillness that preceded his violence. He stopped a foot from them. He didn't acknowledge Park, didn't even glance at him. His eyes were locked on Chloe. The fury was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something fractured and raw that she had only seen once before. You, Taejun said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the silence. Are coming with me. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, as undeniable as gravity. Park chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. I'm afraid the lady is with me. She's my guest of honor. He squeezed her back, a subtle assertion of his claim. Taejun's eyes flickered to Park's hand on her back, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Remove your hand, he said, his voice soft, almost conversational. Or, I will remove it for you. Before Park could respond, The staccato pop-pop-pop of suppressed gunfire erupted from the hallway outside the ballroom. Screams tore through the air. Chaos bloomed as guests dove for cover. Park's attention snapped toward the sound, his bodyguards swarming him. That was the only opening Taejun needed. In the ensuing panic, he closed the distance between them. His hand clamped around her wrist, his grip like steel. He didn't yank her. He pulled her into his body, using his larger frame to shield her as he moved toward a service exit. She should have fought. She should have screamed. But the moment his skin touched hers, a treacherous sense of familiarity washed over her. The scent of him, cedarwood, smoke, and cold, hard power, was an anchor in the chaos. She recognized the look in Park's eyes as something far more dangerous than the familiar storm in Taejun's. She didn't fight. She ran with him. They plunged into the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hotel's back halls. The sounds of the gala, the screams, the music, the gunfire, faded behind them. They emerged into a private underground garage. A black Genesis G90, sleek and menacing as a panther, idled silently, the driver already holding the back door open. He pushed her inside and slid in after her, the door closing with a heavy, final thud. The car peeled out of the garage, tires squealing on the polished concrete before hitting the wet streets of Seoul. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows. He hadn't said a word since the ballroom. The rage rolled off him in palpable waves, filling the confined space of the car until she could barely breathe. She smoothed down the silk of her dress, her hands trembling. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He turned his head, and in the flashing neon glow, she saw his jaw was clenched, so tight a muscle jumped. "Somewhere Park can't find you," his voice was flat, devoid of all emotion now. That was always more terrifying than the anger. "You made a mistake tonight, Chloe. A stupid, reckless mistake. You have no idea what you just walked into." The car sped across the Mapo Bridge, the dark, churning waters of the Han River below. She felt a cold dread seep into her bones. He was right. She had walked back into his world, and this time, she had a terrible feeling she wouldn't be able to walk out again. The penthouse was a place she'd never been, a sterile eagle's nest of glass and steel overlooking the river. It was nothing like the traditional, warm hammock in Buckshin where they had spent their time together. This place was cold, impersonal, less a home, and more a fortress. It was his. Every sharp line, every shadow, every piece of minimalist furniture screamed his name. "You will stay here," Taejun said, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her. The city lights glittered below, a sprawling galaxy he considered his. "My men will be outside the door. You will not leave. You will not contact anyone. Is that understood?" "You can't do this," Chloe said, her voice rising. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a hot surge of anger. "You can't just kidnap me and lock me away. I have a life, a career." He turned slowly, his face an unreadable mask. "Your career is what put you in a room with Park Min-ho. Your life is what I just saved. He saw you with me, Chloe.
He saw you leave with me.
To him, you are now a piece on the board. My piece. He will come for you to get to me. This isn't a prison. It's the only place you're safe." He wasn't protecting her. He was containing a liability. The distinction was sharp and painful. She was a problem he now had to manage. She sank onto a severe leather sofa, the expensive material cold against her bare arms. The red dress suddenly felt garish and foolish in this monochromatic world. Days bled into one another. The penthouse was a gilded cage, luxurious and suffocating. A silent housekeeper brought her meals. A closet had been filled with clothes in her size, all in muted shades of black, gray, and white. A deliberate, silent rebuke of the red that had started all this. Taejun was a ghost. She heard him on the phone sometimes, his voice a low, lethal murmur from behind his closed office door, orchestrating a war she had unwittingly started. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the main living area. The city below was a quiet, sleeping giant. A single lamp was on in his office, casting a warm spill of light across the dark wood floor. She found him there, not on the phone, not working. He was standing by his desk, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, a glass in the other. It was the first time she had ever seen him drink like this, not socially, but with a grim, solitary purpose. His focus was on a small, silver frame on his desk, one she had never seen before. Curiosity warred with her instinct to retreat. She took a tentative step closer. "Go back to bed, Chloe," he said, without turning around. "What is that?" she asked, ignoring his dismissal. He was silent for a long moment. She thought he would order her out again. Instead, he sighed a heavy, ragged sound. A reminder. She moved to stand beside him. The photo was of a young woman, barely out of her teens, with Taejun's dark eyes and a brilliant, unrestrained smile. She was beautiful, and she was wearing a red dress, the exact shade as Chloe's. "My sister," Taejun said, his voice thick with whiskey and something else.
Grief.
Sujin. He took a long swallow from his glass. She was 17. She loved art, music, all the things that have no place in this life. I tried to shield her from it. I thought I could keep one part of my world clean. He stared out the window, but Chloe knew he wasn't seeing the city. He was seeing the past. Park's father and mine were at war.
A territorial disputa.
It was ugly, bloody. Park's clan got desperate. They decided to send a message. They didn't come for me. They came for her. His knuckles were white where he gripped the glass. She was on her way home from a recital. They ran her car off the road. It was her birthday. I had just given her that dress. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy with the weight of his failure. This was his wound. The one vulnerability he carried, hidden beneath layers of bespoke suits and cold control. The woman he had failed to protect. "When I saw you tonight," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper, standing next to him, in that color. "For a second, it wasn't you I saw." Understanding crashed over Chloe with the force of a physical blow. His rage hadn't been about possession or jealousy. It had been about terror. He was seeing a ghost, reliving his greatest failure. Her choice of dress had inadvertently twisted the knife in a wound he'd been carrying for a decade. The next day, the danger escalated. One of Taejun's lieutenants, a man named Choi, reported that Park's men had been spotted in the neighborhood, watching the building. The cage was no longer theoretical. The wolves were circling. Taejun became a phantom of coiled tension, constantly pacing, the lethal energy barely contained beneath his skin. He spent hours in his office, mapping out building schematics, planning for a siege. An opportunity arose in the form of the housekeeper, an older woman with kind eyes. One afternoon, while delivering a tray of tea, she slipped a piece of paper into Chloe's hand. It was a note. "Service elevator. Midnight. I can get you out." It was a lifeline. A chance to run, to disappear before the inevitable violence erupted. Chloe spent hours staring at the note. Her old life called to her, a life of quiet galleries, dusty books, and the satisfying click of a deal well made. But then she thought of the look on Taejun's face when he spoke of Sujin. She thought of Park Min-ho's oily smile and the deadness in his eyes. Running now wouldn't make her safe. It would just make her alone. And it would leave Taejun fighting a war on two fronts, one against Park and one against the ghost she had resurrected. At midnight, she didn't go to the service elevator.
She went to his office.
He was bent over a large blueprint of the building, a red marker in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. "I told you to stay in your room. I had a chance to leave," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I didn't take it." That made him look up. Surprise flickered in his dark eyes. "They're coming for you because of me," she continued, walking toward the desk. "Because he thinks I'm yours. So stop treating me like a liability you have to hide. Tell me how I can help." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. He seemed to be weighing her, measuring her resolve. Finally, he gave a curt nod toward the blueprint. "Park's men will most likely try to breach from the east stairwell or the parking garage. The most vulnerable point is here," he said, tapping a spot on the map. He pulled her closer, his body brushing against hers as he pointed to a service corridor. "If they get past the lobby guards, this is our only way out." His fingers grazed hers as he handed her the marker. The contact was brief, electric. His scent, that intoxicating mix of cedar and storm, filled her senses. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, see the flecks of gold in his obsidian eyes she'd forgotten were there. Their eyes locked over the map of his fortress. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of their shared history and the unspoken tension of the present. It was a moment of pure, undiluted connection, more intimate than any touch. He was the one who broke it, clearing his throat and stepping back, his mask of cold control snapping firmly back into place. But the crack had been there.
She had seen it.
And she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her decision to stay had changed everything. The re-hook, when it came, was not a bullet but a flower. A package arrived, addressed to her. Choi, Taejun's ever-present head of security, inspected it with the caution of a bomb disposal expert before handing it over. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, was a single, perfect red rose. Its petals were dried and brittle, its stems snapped. It was a message from Park Min-ho, a quiet, chilling promise. He knew where she was, and he was coming. The threat was no longer about territory or business. It had become deeply, terrifyingly personal. It was about taking what belonged to Kwon Tae-jun. The attack came 2 nights later. It was swift and brutal. Not a subtle infiltration, but a frontal assault. Alarms blared through the penthouse, a shrill, piercing scream that vibrated through the floor. Choi's voice crackled over an intercom, sharp and urgent. They're in the lobby.
5.
No, 6 of them. He's with them.
He, Park.
Tae-jun moved with a terrifying economy of motion. He grabbed Chloe's arm, his grip firm but not painful, and pulled her toward the back of the penthouse. The panic room.
Now.
They were halfway down the hall when the elevator doors at the far end dinged open. 2 of Park's men, dressed in black tactical gear, stepped out, raising their weapons.
Taeyeon rykte instantly.
He shoved Chloe behind him, his body a solid wall, and drew a sleek, black pistol from the small of his back. The hallway erupted in a cacophony of gunfire. Plaster exploded from the walls. Chloe pressed herself against Taejun's back, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. She could feel the recoil of his weapon through his body, smell the sharp cordite in the air. A searing heat sliced across her upper arm. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath. It was a graze, nothing more, but the sight of the crimson welling up on the sleeve of her white blouse made the world tilt. Taejun saw it. He glanced back, his eyes catching the splash of red against the white fabric. And something inside him broke. The cold, calculated precision vanished, replaced by a primal, unrestrained fury. It was the look of a predator whose territory had been invaded, whose kill had been threatened. With a low growl, he moved. He was no longer just defending. He was hunting. He dispatched the 2 men with a lethal efficiency that was both horrifying and mesmerizing to watch. He got her into the steel-walled panic room, sealing the heavy door behind them. The sound of the firefight outside was muffled, distant. He ignored it. He pushed her gently onto a small bench, his movements urgent as he ripped the sleeve of her shirt to examine the wound. "It's just a scratch," she whispered, her voice trembling. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking slightly as he pulled a medical kit from a cabinet. "He touched you," he snarled, his voice a low guttural sound. He put his hands on what is mine. As he cleaned the wound, his touch surprisingly gentle, Chloe noticed his laptop on a small desk, left open in his haste. The screen showed a dozen surveillance feeds from an external property. She recognized it instantly from her research, Park Min-ho's private mansion in Pyeongchang-dong. An idea, reckless and dangerous, sparked in her mind. "He has a gallery," she said, her voice gaining strength. "A private one. He keeps his most valuable pieces there. He spends an hour there every morning, from 7 to 8, alone.
No guards.
It's his ritual." Taejun stopped dabbing her arm, his eyes lifting to meet hers. "His security is focused on the perimeter," she continued, the words tumbling out. "But the gallery itself has a weakness. A skylight. Old, from the original construction. It's not wired into the main alarm system." She had discovered it during her due diligence, a minor architectural flaw she had noted and dismissed. Now it was a weapon. She was no longer just a victim of this war. She was giving him the key to ending it. She had crossed a line, from the world of authenticated porcelain to the world of tactical weaknesses and violent retribution. And she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Later, after Choi had given the all-clear, they stood on the balcony. The city was a glittering, indifferent witness below. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a hollow exhaustion in its wake. "Why did you wear that dress?" Taejun asked, his voice rough. He wasn't looking at her, but at the sprawling darkness. She didn't pretend not to understand. "It was never about you, Taejun. Not really. After I left, I felt like a ghost. I needed to feel real. That dress. It was the color of being alive, of being free from the shadows." He was silent for a long time. Then he turned to face her, his expression stripped bare in the moonlight. "When I saw you," he began, his voice barely a whisper, raw and honest. Standing next to him, in that color, I didn't feel rage. I felt fear. He took a step closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body. For the first time in 10 years, I was afraid. Afraid of losing something I had no right to claim in the first place. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something far more dangerous. A confession. An admission of a weakness she had become. Before she could process it, before she could find the words to respond, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. He opened it. His body went rigid. He turned the screen toward her. It was a video. A live feed. Chloe recognized her own apartment, the one she had left behind 6 months ago. Her best friend, Sarah, was tied to a chair in the middle of the living room. A man held a gun to her head. Park Min-ho stepped into the frame, his slick smile turning her stomach to ice. "A trade, Kwon Tae-jun," Park's voice oozed from the phone's speaker. "The appraiser for the friend. You have 1 hour. Come alone." The final move had been made, and the target wasn't him. It was her soul. Tae-jun was a storm of controlled violence. He was strapping on a Kevlar vest, checking the magazine of his pistol, his movements sharp, economical, and suicidal. He was preparing to walk into Park's trap, a one-man army against a fortified mansion. "Don't," Chloe said, stepping in front of the door, blocking his path. "You go in there, you both die. This isn't a fight you can win with force." "Get out of my way," Chloe, his voice was deadly calm, the eye of the hurricane. "No," she stood her ground, meeting his furious gaze. "He's expecting a soldier. He's not expecting an art dealer." A plan, insane and born of desperation, was taking shape in her mind. "He wants me, so let him have me. But we do it on my terms." She took his phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing a message to Park. "I'll come, but not there. The GAN Gallery. The new Lee Yuffin exhibit is opening tonight. It's neutral ground. Public. You want me, you come get me in the open." Tae-jun stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "He'll never agree." "Yes, he will," Chloe said, her voice filled with a certainty she didn't feel. "His ego won't let him refuse. Taking me from your fortress is one thing. Taking me in public right under your nose? That's a victory he can't resist." To her shock, Park agreed. An hour later, Chloe was walking into the pristine, white-walled gallery. She wasn't wearing red. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, a lamb walking to the slaughter. But this lamb had teeth. A tiny, nearly invisible wire was taped to her skin, the receiver in Tae-jun's ear as he and his men, disguised as wealthy art patrons, melted into the crowd. She saw Park standing by a massive canvas of swirling gray paint. Sarah was nowhere in sight. He smiled when he saw her, a conqueror's smile. "Bold," he said, gesturing to the art around them. "I'm impressed." "Where is she?" Chloe demanded, keeping her voice steady, her eyes scanning the room, feeding details to Tae-jun. 2 men, east exit. 1 by the bar. Park is armed, right hip. "My dear, business before pleasure," Park murmured, stepping closer. "First, you will come with me. Quietly. Then your friend will be released." He reached for her arm. This was it, the signal. But instead of letting Tae-jun's men move, Chloe acted. With a sudden, sharp movement, she spun away from Park and slammed her elbow backward into the glass case of a delicate porcelain vase behind her. The sound of shattering glass was like a gunshot in the hushed gallery. People gasped. Security guards shouted, their attention immediately drawn to the destruction of a priceless artifact. The chaos was her own creation. It was the distraction Taejun needed. His men moved. The polite facade of the art opening dissolved into a blur of swift, brutal action. In the ensuing pandemonium, Chloe saw one of Park's men dragging a terrified Sarah from a back room. He was pulling her toward a fire exit. Taejun was occupied with Park. No one was going to save Sarah, but her. Chloe grabbed a large, sharp shard of the broken porcelain from the floor. Without a second's hesitation, she ran at the man holding her friend and drove the shard deep into his thigh. He howled, his grip on Sarah loosening. Chloe grabbed her friend's hand and pulled her toward the safety of the swarming gallery security. She didn't wait to be rescued. She had saved them herself. In the aftermath, with Park's men in custody and his power in the city shattered, Taejun found her standing by the broken display case. He was bleeding from a shallow cut on his temple. His suit was torn, but his eyes were clear. They were fixed on her with an expression she had never seen before. Not fury, not passion, but a profound, unnerving respect. He underestimated you, Taejun said, his voice low. He reached out, gently brushing a stray curl from her face. So did I. He looked at the chaos she had orchestrated, at the decisive, violent way she had saved her friend. You are not my weakness, Chloe. His thumb stroked her cheekbone, a touch that was both a brand and a surrender. You are my damn fortress. The cost of that night was absolute. Her career was over. Her name was now irrevocably linked to his. The quiet, orderly world of art and auctions was a country to which she could never return. She had seen the man behind the mask of the Mafia boss, and in doing so, had revealed a part of herself she never knew existed. He, in turn, had laid his empire bare for her, broken every one of his own rigid rules, and exposed his deepest vulnerability to his enemy, all for her sake. Nothing in their world was free. They stood in the silence of his penthouse. The city lights below were quiet witnesses to the wreckage and rebirth of their lives. Her black dress from the gallery lay on the floor, a stark reminder of the lines she had crossed.
He hadn't asked her to stay.
He didn't have to. The question hung in the air between them, more powerful than any words. She walked to the vast window, looking down at the sprawling, glittering map of his empire. A kingdom built on shadows and blood. It should have terrified her. Strangely, it did not. She turned to look at him. He was watching her, his expression a fierce mix of possession and reverence. This wasn't a surrender. It was a choice. A deliberate, dangerous step from the life she had known into the one that was waiting. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were no white knights here, only a king in a realm of darkness who saw her as his queen. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who would burn the entire world to the ground for her. And she knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that she would be the one to hand him the match.